evening, good night, and welcome to Mindful Life 321. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for Thank you for being here. Once you're on the inside, as per usual, make sure you hit that like button. It is the 5th of December. December is moving along swiftly. It's the 5th, moving swift as we're coming to the end of the year. So yeah, we're streaming live on Instagram, on TikTok, and on YouTube. So once you are looking at this live or on repeat over there on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button, double tap the screen over there on TikTok. If you're wondering how do you hit that like button, as many times as you can, you double tap the screen over there. And on YouTube, yeah, you hit the like button and drop a comment if you have something to say. You know, if you're listening to this on repeat, I know there's a serious contingent, serious but small contingent of faithful listeners that listen on the repeat. Make sure you hit that like button right about now so you know you could take the rest in and repeat without having to be bothered to hit that like button then. But yeah, the like button and the comments really do help. They let the algorithm know, hey, this is some good stuff. Send the notification out to some more people. Today is Tuesday. And today, we're still touching on the situation over in South America, our South American neighbors. You know, geologically, if you're talking about our rocks here, you're talking about the stones at the heart of Trinidad and Tobago. You know, if you go down into Dr. Rowley's kind of field, you're talking to Dr. Rowley here. Trinidad and Tobago is geologically, they tell us, more kind of part of South America. It is theorized that we broke off basically off of Venezuela's coast and drifted into the Caribbean Sea a bit over a lengthy period of time. So, I mean, if Venezuela is claiming what was once theirs, maybe they might claim Trinidad too eventually. Who knows? Knock on wood, hopefully not. But Venezuela is claiming most of Guyana, and they had a recent vote on it, and it seems like the vote let us inherit Essequibo. We ain't inheriting anything. We won't be inheriting anything. And you know, I dug a bit further into some of this issue to see like exactly what is Venezuela's claim to this territory. And Venezuela doesn't really have any kind of real historic claim to this territory. They never really administered that territory. The only kind of claim they have is that it wasn't clearly defined previously. But since the British times, it was the British who administered the land, and it was handed over to the Guyanese, and the Guyanese administered the land. I mean, if you go into the Essequibo region and you hear the people speak, you can hear the Guyanese accent. In case you were doubting who they belonged to. White Leather says, vote, they have an authoritarian government. Well, some people are theorizing that the authoritarian government is kind of very linked to the whole idea of this vote in the first place. Let's jump into some stories for today. Call for international pressure on Venezuela. International people need to bring in some pressure, it's being said. The University of Guyana's Law Department head, Dr. Kim Kite Thomas, is calling on countries, including CARICOM, to apply pressure on Venezuela's leadership before it invades Guyana's resource-rich Essequibo region. Her call came during a symposium on Venezuela's December 3rd referendum at the Arthur Chung Conference Center on Monday. So she is calling for many people on the international side of things to pressure and squeeze on Venezuela. Now, exactly how all of that would be done may be left to be seen and said, but I suppose by strongly worded statements for one. She said, so there has to be pressure. I believe pressure has to be put on, and it has to be put on the leadership now. It has to be done now before any illegal act is taken. Because if you can look at that decision and you could decide that you won from that decision, this is bullyism at another level. Isn't Guyana underpopulated anyway? I mean, it's according to what you mean by those words, underpopulated or overpopulated, etc. But Guyana is very sparsely populated. That is true. But the fact of the matter is, Venezuela doesn't need any more land. Venezuela is a massive country in landmass already. So this Venezuela Guyana is basically like Russia, Ukraine. Well, Maduro, the Venezuelan president, seems to be attempting to, as much as possible, link it to that kind of Russian Ukraine deal. But to me, there's a lot of difference. The rhetoric, the narratives are attempting to, the narratives that they are using, they're attempting to mirror those narratives and the rhetoric used by Russia. But the actual facts of the situation are not the same. So, for example, the Ukraine was literally once part of the Soviet Union, which was basically Russia. A significant portion of eastern Ukraine is ethnic Russian. The history of the region is that Russia administered the entire region there. A lot of the infrastructure in Ukraine. Good night, Wendy Medium Excel. It's been a while. It's been a while. A lot of the regions in Ukraine, like even in Ukraine proper, where they hate Russia, the infrastructure they have, some of their power plants, some of their the road networks, the buildings, etc., were built by Russians using Russian resources back during Soviet times. So Russia has grounds for this on a historical point of view. Beside that, there's also the stirring up of conflict in the region. So, for one, Ukraine was once more allied to Russia. They had a leader that was more Russian-leaning. It is argued by some, that there was a coup d'etat that was pushed and promoted by the United States and their intelligence agencies inside of Russia. A color revolution back in, 2014, somewhere there. And they ousted the former Ukrainian leader that was more Russian-leaning, and they put in this new Ukrainian leader that was more American-leaning. So it could be said that there was influence that further destabilized the region. On top of that, NATO, the alliance that is supposed to be the North Atlantic Alliance, basically those guys from World War II that wanted to make sure those kinds of things don't happen again, they are in alliance there, and they promised the Soviets that when the Soviet Union disbanded, that they will not move any further east. And they keep moving further east. You see, as a NATO ally, Ukraine would be entitled to have American ammunition, rocket soldiers, etc., deployed inside of their country on the Russian border. One can ask themselves, if for some reason Mexico begins aligning themselves with Russia, would the United States be comfortable with Mexico becoming a close ally of Russia and stockpiling Russian ammunition and weapons? I highly doubt it. The United States was willing to go thermonuclear when it seemed like Cuba might be going closer to the Russians and getting some nukes inside of there. So the Russia-Ukraine situation is not exactly the same as the Venezuela-Guyana situation. Venezuela does not have that historical claim like Russia did. Venezuela wasn't in existence in that same spot for 1,000 years, and they're able to prove that at points in times previously, they owned and controlled that entire region. That's not how it happened. Venezuela declared their independence from the Spanish crown, the Spanish colonialists. They were another colonial project. They have no historical claim there. Venezuela never administered that land. They were never in control of the land. The argument is basically that that the British never officially drew borders to claim this land, so then they have an argued claim for it. That's all to their claim, basically. I find it ridiculous. And the claim was arbitrated upon, and people could claim that it was unfairly arbitrated, but it was. And it was determined that it's Guyana's territory. Now there's another arbitration matter, I believe, that is still being heard, and they're waiting for an end to that. Do any of you think that our PM should take a position on this issue? Well, Brown, our Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Dr. Amory Brown, he says, respect Caribbean Sea as zone of peace. And he went in to speak about that because I don't know if you all were here yesterday, but there were calls from the opposition from one of the opposition members to take a clear stance there. You know, we need to make a statement on this. But our minister, the line minister for this, had a statement to say in regards to this. I must say, this is Dr. Amory Brown speaking here. I must say that I've been very disturbed by some voices coming from the opposition in this country, which once again is trying to make itself an outlier. It is trying to insert itself into foreign policy matters in which it has demonstrated very little expertise and an appetite for division and negative views. Any calls for Titi to insert itself into the controversy in the form of mediation or direct negotiation are in direct contradiction, a direct violation of the policy of Guyana, a sovereign member of CARICOM, on this dispute. What do we get in there to do or say? Guyana has said they brought the matter before the International Criminal Court. The matter is currently being heard and arbitrated. Why is Trinidad going to get involved in that? What place do we have there? And listen to me, the only way we could join this and not get Guyana very angry is if we join with the view that the entire Essequibo region and territory is Guyana's own. That's the only position we could take in negotiations that would not upset Guyana. Can you imagine Trinidad and Tobago, with our far self, entering negotiations and asking Guyana how much of their territory they would be willing to give up? How do you think Guyana is going to take that? We cannot get in there. There's nothing for us to do. What will we do? And now, we are not exactly remaining neutral, because we have voiced that we support Guyana's claim on this. As a CARICOM member, we have support, and we put our support behind Guyana. What more should we do or get ourselves involved with? What can we do? We go ask Guyana to give up some of their land? Why would Guyana do that on our asking? Or we go ask Venezuela to stop doing this? Why would Venezuela do that on our asking? The mayor says send troops. Well, that is probably the only thing we can do. And who knows? Who knows? It may yet be something that we might do. I don't know. Is there a defense treaty side to the Treaty of Chaguaramas, CARICOM Treaty? Is there a defense pact side in it? I don't know. If there is a defense treaty side, you don't get any more of engagement of a defense treaty than your neighbor laying claim and annexing 2/3 of your land mass. So, I don't know. I kind of don't mind the current position we are in, where we voice, hey, we support our CARICOM neighbors. Yeah, we support our CARICOM neighbors. Or you sound like that math guy. I have a feeling that the math guy you're talking about just might. Ah, but Kamala has a little more to say. The opposition leader. Kamala tells Maduro, stay out of Guyana. Opposition leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar has warned Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro that if he interferes with the Guyanese people, he is interfering with Trinidad and Tobago too. You about that. Like, don't get me wrong. I love my Guyanese. Guyana is a nice place. I mean, I'm married into Guyanese heritage. Nothing. Uh, just, Guyana is a lovely. But, but when you mean if they interfere with them, they interfere with us. Like, how you mean? Because I don't want Venezuela to take the people land. But Venezuela interfering with Guyana is not necessarily interfering with Trinidad and Tobago. I just must make that point be. When he says Venezuela recognizes that Guyana is booming, so they want in on their territory. That might be part of it, but I don't actually think. Now, I could be wrong, and maybe Venezuela is launching as we speak. Venezuela is launching an invasion of Guyana. I don't know, but I feel from reading enough. I feel from reading enough of the news surrounding it. I don't feel like the intention is actually to claim piece of Guyana. I think it's an internal move. It's an internal move using external realities. Persad-Bissessar said, and listen to what Persad-Bissessar is saying here, because maybe what she initially said, I may not totally agree with, but this part of what she's saying here shows that, well, it shows that the lady has some experience in geopolitics. Persad-Bissessar added, the intention of the current crisis between Guyana and Venezuela, created by Maduro, is to whip up nationalism under the false pretext that the international community is mistreating Venezuela. He wants to make himself a victim defending the motherland and will paint himself as a great hero of Venezuela, as Bolivar and Chavez. And I agree with Mrs. Persad-Bissessar's conclusion. Hearing from people inside of Venezuela, hearing the accounts that maybe they lied about how many people voted in the exercise in the first place, and knowing that that there's a presidential election for next year, it makes all of this seem like some kind of run-up for what is to happen next year. My conclusion is that the opposition leader wants to make oil deals with Guyana. Well, that isn't a bad idea. But I kind of agree. His intention seems to be to deploy the army due to the threat of war, then control streets and movements of persons to prevent campaigning and protests. That seems like a much more plausible idea. That he sorry, he activates the Venezuelan military. They are deployed all over the streets because, we have to do something about this bit of our territory in Guyana, Essequibo. And then that military show of force remains on the street till after the election. How many of you want to bet that the Venezuelan increased level of deployed military is going to remain buzzing around until after their election is called? Or maybe even better yet, you delay the election because it's an emergency. The country is at war. Sir asks, he's so smart? Well, he doesn't even have to be necessarily. Because that's a common tactic of dictators all over the world. You don't have to be smart to develop it. You just have to copy it from someone else. She recalled the Kamala Prasad Bissessa recalled that as Prime Minister in 2015, she stood with Guyana's then President David Granger when Venezuela claimed maritime waters encompassing Guyana's exclusive economic zone. She said that occurred because of the Venezuelan elections that December. I stood up for the people of Guyana in 2015, and the UNC will stand with the people of Guyana now. But Keith Rowley sheepishly hides behind the zone of peace. Rowley's talk about the region remaining a zone of peace isn't enough. Guyana must know they have our full support with meaningful and practical backing. Now, Tanti comes. I am not sure exactly what you mean. But the statement that they have our full backing with full support with meaningful and practical backing, what does that mean? To me, that sounds like, the United States euphemistically says that they're going to launch or deploy some soldiers into a foreign country. Well, you must understand that Ukraine has our full support with meaningful and practical backing, which means that they're practically going to drop some soldiers in your land. So it nearly sounds like Tance is suggesting maybe some of the regiment boys go over there. I wonder how that is going to go over if some of our regiment boys, they're deployed on the Guyanese border. Go out there to protect the front line of CARICOM. I mean, if CARICOM remained as a federation, we'd have all been one federated union. So that might have really been the southern border of the Caribbean Federation. And we have to defend it. Won't you defend your CARICOM? You're against some of the regiment boys going down south. Good night, Rose Petal at Angel Nick. Lambs to the slaughter. What you mean, sir? What you mean? Are you saying that our well-trained boys in camouflage can't handle themselves in a conflict zone? The mayor says send the gang leaders out there. Bro, the gang leaders don't even be fighting their own gang wars, innit? The gang leaders, some of those gang leaders, maybe in their youthful days, they were shooters and gunmen out there. But plenty of them gang leaders getting overweight and just chilling and drinking and smoking whole day. They ain't in any position to fight anything. If you hear things get serious and they talking conscription, all trainees under the age of 40, all able-bodied men under 40 are being called up for military duty to be deployed in South America. Ooh. Talib Jairam says all over the world have armies. We have army fet. But I mean, what else? What else do you want the army to do? What fet? Ronnie says that's not our war. Well, I mean, the truth is people have been fighting in wars that weren't theirs all along. There were trainees fighting in World War II. I think there were trainees fighting in World War One. The mayor says I'll be deploying myself on a plane to England. Oh, we have a draft dodger, do we? Mayor, you are a draft dodger, are you? Lynn says we like Caribs and Iraqs, friendly and carnivaling if any of these CBI investors decide to annex. A lot of the world could afford to do this kind of frolicking thing because the United States acts as the global police. People don't like the reality that the United States acts as the global police, but this is why. This is at least the suggestion that they have as to the reason why they do that. Because there are always situations like this. Some people believe that, you know, human beings are just so kind. Humans will never do these kinds of things to each other. While the truth is, once someone has the ability to, what they will do, knows. If they decide to attack via sea, you don't think that we're in the firing line anyway? I don't see why they will attack via sea. Guyana has no sea defense for them to attack. Like, what would they attack via sea? There's nothing to attack. You just be shooting up forest. And you see, that's the next thing, you know. That's the next thing. Conquering land is not as easy as people make it seem. It's not as easy as people make it seem. Like, Russia could have conquered eastern Ukraine to some extent because there were people there who wanted to be under Russian rule. If no one, or the vast majority of everyone in Essequibo doesn't want to be ruled by Venezuela and their authoritarian communist leading government, how is Venezuela ever going to control that piece of land? It's already forested. If those guys decide to launch guerrilla warfare at you, you're dead. You will never make it through. The United States, with the world's most advanced military, couldn't survive guerrilla warfare out in the desert in Afghanistan. There's nothing you could do about that. If the people who live on the land don't want you to rule the land, what are you going to do? The Venezuelan army is probably larger than the population of Guyana. Well, if you're talking that kind of thing, well, then you would actually have to occupy every single corner of the region with your military. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to do that? Occupy all of Guyana with your military? And I mean, if we're going back to that kind of world where you see an opportunity and you launch an invasion and take it, if Venezuela plays fast and launches an invasion into a rainforested region inside of Guyana to take it and stretch their military, well, then it might make sense Brazil come in from the south and take piece of Venezuela too. Guyana just needs some iron domes from Israel. Well, I believe the United States pays for the iron dome in Israel anyway. And Guyana isn't facing rocket fire. Iron Dome is for rocket fire. The Iron Dome doesn't stop a vote. And it won't stop the men if they choose to cross the borders either. It's very easy to take land, you just have to be bold enough. No, it's not very easy to take land. If you're talking in terms of inside a country, as in squatting, that's another issue. But if you're talking one country to another, that's not very easy. It's not very easy. One of the things is you're very likely going to have to kill everyone on that piece of land. The nature of how humans are, it's if you kill everyone on that piece of land, the chance is very high that some one of the people you killed would have a living relative who would be very upset about the fact that you wiped out all the rest of their living relative. So you are going to, in the process of wiping out everyone, create lifelong enemies there. It's not something very easy to do. It's not something very easy to do. And even more difficult in modern times where you have to still do it while not looking like a monster. You know, and nearly everyone fights a war in modern times while trying to look like the good guy. Even the bad guys attempt to look like the good guys in modern times because of social media. It's almost always a PR campaign. So it's difficult to fully conquer some piece of land. Spanish people know about genocide, don't worry. Yikes. Yikes. I mean, South America on a whole would know a lot about that kind of genociding business. It's not a strange thing to them. They know how that goes. But let's jump into another story. Let's jump into something on the young people here. Young people had a youth parliament. You know, the youth parliament is a vibe sometimes. Seeing the young people discuss, seeing them use their intellect and wits in a nearly adversarial manner, seeing what they do. And the discussion this year was interesting. The discussion was on SCA. What did Captain America say? When someone tries to win a war, before it starts, innocents always die. Correct. Motion to abolish SEA defeated in youth parliament. A motion to abolish the secondary entrance assessment examination was defeated by a 23-21 margin at the sitting of the 20th National Youth Parliament at the Red House, Port of Spain on Monday. The motion was defeated after 4 hours of spirited debate by 44 youth parliamentarians selected from several educational institutions and youth groups. In opening and closing debate on the motion, opposition leader Cheyenne St. Hilaire maintained that SCA is cruel, inhumane, and detrimental to the mental and emotional well-being of students and parents. Like, okay, I understand this is a debate. I'm not necessarily criticizing the person's debate and themselves. I'm talking about the substance of the words here. And I've heard people say things like this. I've heard people say things like this before. That exams like SCA are cruel, inhumane, and detrimental to the mental and emotional well-being of students and parents. And I think if you have a child who is being treated cruelly, is having inhumane treatment, and an exam is being detrimental to them, like SCA, the problem isn't SCA, but the parents or the guardians surrounding that child. The exam itself is words on paper. How could asking a child questions in a written form be cruel, inhumane? Like, I mean, and this is some of the problem I have with the modern trauma language and everyone is a victim kind of language. I find sometimes we overdo it. Like, what does inhumane mean? What is the meaning of inhumane? The suggestion of inhumane is it's some kind of manner in which a human should never be treated. That's kind of the idea you get of humane. It's so cruel. You should never treat a human being like this. So, asking a 12-year-old, yeah, John, thanks. It's the virus that's been going around where cough just stays on your chest and it kind of just doesn't want to go. I have some African sea coconut. I'll try that. But yeah, is it inhumane to find out what a child knows? How is that inhumane? I think the focus is on the so-called stress it causes. And I understand that. I understand why people would focus on that. But the stress that the exam causes is not really due to the exam. That's not on the exam. The stress is because, like, when you're going to an exam, if you're feeling stressed, it's not because the exam is stressful. It's because you are worried about what's going to happen if you don't do well on the exam. That is what is stressful. So it's the worry about what the parents are going to do, about what the system is going to do, about how they are going to be treated otherwise. That's the stress, not the exam itself. To me, common entrance wasn't stressful. I don't know what happened. To me, when I look, exams are stressful to children whose parents make it stressful. Like they are high performing students, A students, who become stressed for exams because their parents put the stress on them. There are also A performing students who have zero stress for exams because that's how their parents treat it. Their parents treat it like, it's okay. I know you're doing the best you can. Don't worry about that. I know how you're doing already. And to me, that's where parents should be. If you as a parent, you're paying attention to your child in school, then your child getting an F in an exam should never be a surprise to you. Like, why as a parent you're surprised by your child getting an F? If a parent is surprised by their child getting an F, then give the parent an F too, because you are getting a failing grade too. Like, I find a parent should be able to guess their child's grade within, a reasonable standard deviation. Not too much degree of error here. You know your child. Every day, you see how much work your child puts in. You speak to your child about schoolwork, so you know how they respond to it, or at least you're supposed to be doing those things. So the exam should never be any kind of surprising, stressful licks passing because I vex about how you do. I am not supposed to be vexed about what you did. I knew how you were doing. I knew you weren't doing homework all term. I knew you were skipping class. I knew you weren't performing well. So then it's no surprise to me. If I wanted to cut your tail over something, I was supposed to cut your tail since October when I knew you weren't doing homework then. How come I waiting till December when the exam done and I find out, oh no, you fail. Oh my, what a surprise. You knew they weren't doing the work. Like, come on. So I don't believe that the exam is cruel, inhumane, and detrimental. I don't have a problem with exams. I actually think exams are a good thing by and large. I actually like the idea of putting some stress on the little ones. I think the little ones need more stress. Personally, I think in modern times, one of the things we've lost is the amount of stress put on children. They need some more stress. Their life too easy. Because the reality is, life has stressors. You're not you're not going to get through life without facing stressful situations. And if the aim of every adult around you is to ensure you never face stressful situations, what's going to happen to you when you reach at the stage where the stress becomes unavoidable? Is it any surprise then why self-harm rates are skyrocketing? Why every one of these in the younger generation seem that they need to be popping six different antidepressants just to make it through the day? Is it any surprise then? When the Medium Excel says I prefer continuous assessments towards the final goal, not one exam, I think we can do both. I don't see a reason why both can't be done. You can do continual assessment and do final exams. Both of them. John says, I've noticed that extra classes have become the norm and it is an added expense. Well, that's how I make a living, so it's not like I complain about that. I am a teacher and I teach privately exclusively. But it's understandable why, because the school systems are failing. That's why people are noticing that their children aren't succeeding in the school system. We're going to touch on just that with another story right after this. But when the Medium Excel, I think we could do both. So you have a child, you could see, okay, they are getting A's in continuous assessment and they are getting D's in their final exam. Why is that? That's an interesting thing. Let's analyze this. The problem with continuous assessment alone, and we're going to get into this. Let me steal the youth and their counterpoints. We're going to get into it. She advocated, this was the young lady who was against SE. She advocated that it be abolished and be replaced by a system of ongoing student assessment and the introduction of a more holistic system of evaluation and education of our nation's children. St. Hilaire and other MPs described the system as a continuous academic performance assessment. Point-of-Pay MP Alana Atwell described the government as being delirious for continuing the SEA. She said it was the common entrance exam under a different name. Is the government ignoring this crisis? Another asked. She wondered why government would want to put 11 and 12-year-old children through the stress that is the SEA. And I will tell you, I want my 11 and 12-year-old children to face stress. I want my 5-year-olds to face a certain kind of age-appropriate stress. My 8-year-olds also. And then 9, and then 10, 11, 12, all ages face the stress. And maybe when we're talking about in a controlled environment, maybe I would want them to face as much stress as they can take. Once it's in a controlled environment, nearly as much stress as they can take. If they can take just to the point where they realize how much stress they can take, that's a lesson, a very important lesson that you just taught that person. I don't know how many of you played sports. And in sports, that's one of the main things they do in training. In training, at the start of training, you come and they tell you go run 10 laps. The coach knows that many of those boys can't run 10 laps. But he wants to see who can reach to that point. And then after the 10 laps, that's warm up. You come and we doing PT, physical training, push-ups, jumping jacks, pushing you as hard, stressing you as much as possible, pushing you to that breaking point just as much as you could take. We're getting right into that, Ronnie. With Prime Minister Sada Bandu leading the charge, the government dismissed the opposition's arguments as baseless. Bandu said the kappa being proposed by the opposition was a recipe to promote favoritism and nepotism. And I say that 100%. My schooling life was replete with examples of teachers having favorites and nepotism inside of the classroom. If the kind of teachers I had during my schooling had the ability to ratch and fudge exam results for the entirety of the period, they damn well sure would have done it. Because I had teachers that were cheating for girls back in the 90s, changing their grades, and the only way I could have figured it out is because it was a final exam and everyone could look back at the paper. But if you have 5 years of continuous assessment, who is to know how much of that weight was just because the teachers liked this fair-skinned little child? And let's not pretend like we don't know about those things happening in school. And I'm talking across races here in Trinidad and Tobago. This country, we could pretend like we don't know about it, but we know about colorism in this country. Next thing you see, all the nice little cute fair-skinned children, all of a sudden, they get all the A's. And the boy might be miserable, but he's sharp as a tack. But he a little miserable. The teachers never like him. He don't comb his hair. His skin always dry. You know, he not likable, but he's smart. What do you think his continuous assessment is going to look like? I believe continuous assessment has much more room for corruption. And I also believe that we can all agree Trinidad and Tobago is a country that suffers problems with corruption. Do we want to engage a system that allows and rewards increased corruption? She also said differences in the approach to teaching at different schools contributed to students' performance in the SEA as opposed to problems with the exam itself. Listen, Sada Bandu, young lady, we could have a conversation. Somebody get Sada on the live. Sada, we could talk. We could talk, Sada. She is noting that different schools perform differently on the SEA, which suggests the problem isn't the SEA exam itself, but that some schools don't have a good teaching approach. If continuous assessment has a project and presentation at the end, it can be validated better. What I'm saying is, I don't have a problem with continuous assessment being utilized. But that should not be replacing the exam. Life has tests. That is life. If you enter a job field, you're going to do a project probably for 3 years, and after the 3 years, there's a commissioning of the job. That's the test. It's going to be a high-stress affair that you have to prepare for, revise for, go over notes, make sure you understand everything. Life has tests. You can't get rid of tests. Like, somehow people, and that's what aggravates me with the modern generation. And that's why I say the problem is they don't have enough stress. It's not that they are too stressed, they don't have enough. You need to go and buy a goat and send them out in the cane field to cut grass in the morning to bring for the goat before they go to school. Send them to milk a cow, pick up eggs, shovel up some manure, and then go to school. And then they might have the appropriate stress levels to really be able to focus. Teacher encourage parents to use whatever contacts in secondary school for placements. So in my book, you can use a continuous assessment, and that's just another marker on the child's report book. So your continuous assessment grade is separate from your final exam grade. So now you could see, okay, some children, this child is struggling in their exam, but they're acing continuous assessment. You could understand now, okay, we maybe need to focus on their ability to stay concentrated in high stress moments where we know now where we have to focus. Or maybe this child aces all exams, but they're floundering in continuous assessment. Why is that? Maybe they're not coming to school as much. Maybe generally during the school term, they have a stressful life at home. We can decide what is going on. Maybe they have no help at home. These are things that you could try to figure out. But having one replacing the other isn't necessary to me. And I find that's a cop-out. No. Train the children how to take exams. Life has tests. Life has difficulties. Life has stress. If you're a girl becoming a lady, some point in time, very likely, because something like upwards of 80% of females who ever lived made children, at some point in time, you're going to start a course that's going to take 9 months, where you have 9 months to prepare for it. And at the end of those 9 months, you have no choice. The test is coming, and it's going to be difficult and a bit painful. That test is unavoidable. Yes, but that exam should not be the determining factor alone. And I partially agree. It's according to what we're talking about here. I could see that the exams be the determining factors for certain things. So, okay, let's say we have all those exams at the age of 12. And we figure out at the age of 12, there's a group of 5% of our nation's students. 5% of our nation's students can perform exceptionally well under high pressure. We figure that out. Shouldn't we use that information? We take those 5% that are able to perform well under high pressure and put them in further high pressure zones and send them to the moon. And if someone isn't performing good at the high stress level, we figure that out and we put them at maybe a medium stress level. And here's the thing. That is actually what the SEA is supposed to be about. The SEA isn't necessarily supposed to be about telling you your child is smart, dumb, or indifferent. It's a placement exam that is supposed to do like the sorting hat. If you all are those Harry Potter fans, do like the sorting hat. Okay, these children are exceptionally well, do exceptionally well at this. Okay, we're going to further this with them. So we place this group of children in this kind of institute. And these children are struggling with this. So we place this group of children in this kind of institute. And we're supposed to have so many variable kinds of institutes that we are able to take care of all the different kinds of children. Unfortunately, we went with the one-size-fits-all insane dummy approach where everyone gets a place and everyone is supposed to get the same place. Plenty of the good schools are religious schools and they give their members a help. Yes, they do give their members a little boost. And to be honest, I don't mind such a system. I don't mind such a system. if you want to go to the people's religious school, which they tell you is superior because they follow this religion, why should they not push their religion too? If you don't like their religion, why do you want to go to their school? Like, I don't have a problem with it. I actually don't. And in Trinidad, our multicultural country, different religions are allowed to do just that same thing. So if you feel left out from another religion, go find yours. Can we pattern our method after other highly academic nations? Like which ones? And I'll tell you if we can, because some of those highly academic nations are homogenous, and that might be partially why. The difficulty is getting a homogenous culture. It's getting a culture that all leans towards the same thing. So you might say, to some extent, China, to some extent, is highly academic. They're not totally so, but to some extent. And that's because they have more of a homogenous culture, also with an authoritarian top-down government. Those things aren't easy to happen in Trinidad and Tobago. Like, if you want to talk about things in Trinidad and Tobago, that's why I regularly go to the United States. Because they are, well, at least they attempt to be multicultural like we are. And you see the difficulties in things like that. See the difficulty in such situations. Another one of the youth MPs added, he said there's evidence to show standardized tests were superior to continuous assessment to ensuring the educational progress of students. Trim added that the latter could allow parents to do the schoolwork for their children, while teachers could grade students in ways to make themselves look good. Public Utilities Minister Samantha Rampasad asked, are we grading students or their parents? And that's true. That's true. Continuous assessment. How much parental help is going to end up being graded? In continuous assessment, does it look good for a teacher to have a class that is all failing? Would a teacher have vested interest in boosting grades falsely? Interesting question. And on that note of education, another article that was following this. Homeschooling success. And for those of you who don't know, as per usual, this live is brought to you by Mindful Education, Mindful with 2 L's, Education, Mindful_Education, if you're looking for us on Instagram, which is the educational institution that I run. We offer homeschool style classes with learning pods, which utilize small, in-person, more personalized style classes. Around 6 students per class is what we do. We have learning stages. We don't do learning ages. We do learning stages from preschool all the way up to CXC, part-time and full-time for those classes. So if you are interested in that, be sure to hit us up. We also offer private tutoring. Yes, Mr. Shiv. Private tutoring for most CXC and CAPE subjects. If you are interested in that, you need that one-on-one attention. You might be a repeater. You might be someone doing it for the first time. You're struggling with something. You think that this isn't really my thing. I need someone to sit with me and really go through this and break this down. How letters reach in numbers and all that. All of that. Private tutoring. If you need that for CXC or CAPE subjects, you get into contact with us and we'll get a tutor out for you. Preschool level also. Yes, we do. We have a preschool that is up and running, and not to toot our own horns, but the preschool level seems to be the best performing. it feels like the ability to get them from young is a whole different ball game when you're able to get them from the preschool level. And I don't know how many of you know what the ECCE centers push, but your child plays in sand all day in those ECCE centers. I'm just letting you know. They're playing in sand all day basically. And the levels we get at, some of our students by the age of 5, they're acing standard 1 work. One of our students is 5 years and recently placed first in his standard 1 class. Just saying. So the preschool is doing really well. Some schools have principals who ensure that teachers teach and not skulk and they have visible results. Correct. Hey, they does do work here. You sure, Nisi? You sure? Because the majority of them that I have seen and heard about is real play. And when I talk to some people in charge of those places, they say that's the basically the theory, the learning style and approach that they use. Now, I'm a firm believer that children should learn through play. But learn through play. Not like there are 3 words there. It's not just play. It's learn through play. They took out the learn through and just left play. That's nonsense. And now, one of the other further frustrating parts of that is when some of our preschool style students who do preschool with us and our nature of preschool, if they reach primary school, they reach in first year and they are like, what nonsense is this? Because first year is back to ABC and 1, 2, 3. And our students are writing full words and reading and know their name and know addition and subtraction. So they're just going to sit down in first year, second year and do nothing. No, skip them first year, skip them second year, and they're in standard 1 and they're still overperforming there. I've been on both sides, so I know those children can't read, they see play, play, play. But if someone's child can't spell their name, that's on parents though. I agree, that is on parents, but it is exacerbated by the system that basically tells parents that you aren't doing anything wrong if your child only plays in mud all day. I disagree with that. And the part that I find to be nefarious in some of this, the people that push ideals like this and tell you your ghetto child is only good for playing in sand all day, they don't send their children to do that. They say that, psychologists say that, if you start the child in this pushing of academic too much, it's going to frustrate the mind and BS. So they tell you, make your child into a dummy. But they don't do that for their children. Everyone always studying elementary and high school. Very few study about preschool to be. Yes. And preschool is the building block. It's the start. Private ECC and public ECC is 2 different things though. Yeah, well, Nisi, when I say ECCE center, I should have explained that. It should be understood that I mean public ECCE centers here, because private ECCEs, they could generally do more of what they want. But I've heard from some private people running ECCEs that the government oversight seeks to bring down the level of teaching that they push. They kind of have to hide and teach. And I'm like, who are these evil people creating this system? You have to hide and teach. Anyway, homeschooling success. Homeschooling success can lead to academic achievement, as evident in the success story of Rodrigo Sanchez of Point 14. 2 Saturdays ago, Sanchez, 21, graduated with his Bachelor of Science in Internet Technology from Costa. The secret behind his achievement was his mother's dedication to homeschooling. Contacted via telephone by the Express to discuss her son's success, Josanne Matthews said, parents are afraid to homeschool their children, but what it does is it builds a relationship with the child and the parent. It gives a lot of flexibility and removes a lot of anxiety. And well, Wendy Medium Excel, you can message me, just so you know, you can message me. That is what we do. And I would like everyone to take notes of the facts surrounding this case, because people sometimes talk about single parent. They sometimes talk about, well, you have to be privileged, the kind of job you need, the kind of money you would need, and those kinds of things. And if you yourself are not educated enough to do it, let's look at the facts surrounding this situation. The 41-year-old mother shared that she noticed her son was struggling with his grades in secondary school. He went to Vesini Secondary School, but he was not performing well there. I think his first grades were B's, and then C's, D's, and then F's. He also failed twice somewhere in Form 2, she said. Matthews linked this to the passing of her father, who was a father figure to Sanchez. I don't want to get into broadcasting the woman's private business, but if his grandfather who died was his father figure, it kind of suggests the kind of household that he lives in there. Okay? She left her job and listened to the job this mother, who seems like she may have been a single mother, listened to her job. She left her job as a security officer at Executive Bodyguard Services Limited, EBSL, realizing that she needed to be at home to support her children. She spoke to his school about counseling and shifting him to another class, but when there was no response on either of those issues, she came up with a solution to the issue. And this is one of the points I keep making. Even if someone is a less educated parent, if they are a parent who cares about their child, nearly no one else would seek the child's better interest. Teachers educated to the throat, up to the throat in educational sciences. They have their MPhil and their doctorate in education. They still will not care for your child as much as you do. Moms was trying to work within the school system. Only my child failing. Do something different. I know my child could learn. I know my child. I grew up with my child. He isn't a duncy boy. He could learn. Something you're doing there needs to be tweaked to help him to learn better. Please. I quit school. I quit work. I am home with him. I'm willing to work. You all in school, do something. Let me work with him. Nothing. The mother of two said that she would keep her son home 3 days a week. And in the first term, she saw a drastic improvement in his grades. I guided him through that. We had no teacher, no help, nobody. It would be interesting to know what mommy's CXC qualifications may have been. Because whether they were high or not, I would say they didn't need to be high. because it wasn't knowledge qualification. It was about mommy supporting son in learning. If you ask me, who would be best suited to presenting information and making a conducive learning environment, I cannot see who would be better than a parent. Maybe even specifically a mommy. Like, I remember there were people I know through the years. There are students like this, and I don't know if some of you all know students like this. Students who will do the work once someone sits with them. They don't need help. They don't need you to tell them anything. They just need someone to sit on the chair next to them while they're doing the work. You sit there for an hour and they will give you an hour of work. If you get up in 15 minutes, 15 minutes is all the work they will do. In many cases, that's what you look at. Some of these stories. Dr. Ben Carson, a former US candidate for president, one of the first doctors, if not the first doctor, to separate joined congenital twins, joined at the head. You look at his story. His mother was a single mother who would have anxious breakdowns, mental breakdowns, and would go and check herself into a mental institute. She would go and check us when she find things getting too hectic. She would go check herself into a mental institute, take a week, and then come back out. And she sat with him, pushing him to become a neurosurgeon. Sorry. Nisi says, no teacher not sitting down with anyone. And I mean, can you fully blame the teacher? If you have a class of 35 children, the actual teaching you might get is what? 6 hours, 5 hours? Who has the time? Mommy went on. Mommy said, I had the conversation with him when I left my job that we'll be sacrificing time for money. Or I think she said that reverse there. It's actually that they sacrificed money for time. Maybe they had less money, but now she had the time. And the time paid off. We bought all the books and past papers and did them at home. I really wanted to show him he has the capability of passing these subjects. Even though people were saying he was too young and it's too much, she added Sanchez would go on to attain 7 passes at the CSEC level, and at 15 years old would begin his associate degree in internet technology at Costat. From failing at Form 2. From failing at Form 2 to finishing CXC by 15 and starting your associate degree. Mommy homeschooling. No outside teachers. Mommy isn't a PhD professor in university. 15. Mommy went on, sometimes I wonder if he's the youngest child to start a degree in this country. But I don't know. I think he might be the youngest at Costat, he mentioned. She said, Matthews is currently at home schooling her 7-year-old. Mommy done learn. Mommy done learn. 7-year-old home with me homeschooling already. So here, listen to this. Mommy is at home schooling her 7-year-old, and listen where son works. And Sanchez, the son, works as a software engineer at Ramps Logistics. In case you all don't know, Ramps Logistics might be the number one logistics company in the country. If not the number one, they're certainly headed in that direction. They're one of those who early on blew up in Guyana with a Guyanese branch. They're massive. And youth man at the age of 17, they say? No, 21 he is right now. He's 21 now. Is a software engineer for Ramps Logistics. And sometimes people ask, so I remember Reeve. I don't know if Reeve in the live today, but I know sometimes he looks at the YouTube repeat. Reeve was talking about this. Like, how would you get into university after this homeschooling thing? There you see it. How will you get a job after this homeschooling thing? Reeve, you are asking. Here's example crime. Mommy was a security guard. Son was failing out of VENEZUELA secondary. So it's not like son was a prayers boy or son was a naps boy. So you would say, well, he was naturally smart anyway. He's a bright boy anyway. Not like that's the backstory. Son was going VENEZUELA secondary, failing at Form 2. Isn't that the story of a lot of young boys? Some government school, failing out at Form 2. What you gonna do? Failing? What you gonna do? You go find a work when he done. Mommy decided, no. I'll homeschool him. From failing at Form 2 in VENEZUELA secondary school, completing CXC at 50 and starting his associate degree. If that isn't an advertisement for homeschooling, I don't know. That's all I have, people. That's all I have for now. Any other questions or comments in the live before I dive out? See if anyone was over there and you commenting. No comments over either. You know if Jordan Peterson University start yet? I think they did start, but not like in full. I don't think it's like in full right now. I visiting your economic island tomorrow, bro. Well, enjoy your stay. Enjoy your stay in the lovely Trinidad. Doesn't one have to register with the MOE for homeschooling? Well, the ministry's new homeschooling policy is seeking to create such a situation where you have to register with the ministry before you start homeschooling. But really and truly, previously, all you had to do was inform the minister. You didn't have to register. You had to just inform the minister. Now, they're seeking to have some requirements and registration and that, and I'm against it. I am not for it. Fireban that. If a parent decides they want to educate their child, I understand. I understand if you say, okay, maybe you should inform the Ministry of Education so that the ministry doesn't wonder if this child dropped out of school. You understand they're just homeschooling. But other than informing the ministry, I don't see any other thing needed. If I never knew how to read and I want to educate my child, I should still have the ability. There are people who didn't know how to read, and they were responsible for educating people who did know how. That's my belief, honestly. And to me, it doesn't have to do with education in and of itself. I think I think it has to do with who has the child's best interest. I think in 99.99% of the cases, it will be the child's biological parents that have their best interests at hand. Not any education system, regardless of how much they like to convince they might. So in that case, even a parent who doesn't know how to read, if they're interested in homeschooling their child and they recognize they are incapable of teaching them how to read, if they care about their child, which very likely they will find someone else or some other method to allow the child to learn. That's just the reality. It's like mommy showed in the Destiny school there. It's like mommy showed in the Destiny school there. When you run up on those problems, people act like the school systems solve those problems, but they don't. Little Miss Mediators says, unfortunately, there are people saying they are homeschooling and they really are not, if you make it bad for the others. But Little Miss Mediator, I could say kind of the same thing about the public school system. There are schools that say they are teaching, that there are schools that say they are schooling and they are not. The evidence shows it. There are children coming out of schools with 0 passes. I think any school that produces a child with 0 passes after 5 years needs to be shut down. Fire those teachers. That's insane. How could you have a student for 5 years and they pass nothing? Like, at some point in the 5 years, someone of the professional expert teachers was supposed to recognize this child is not absorbing 1 iota of data that we are giving them. So, if you're asking me who I would rather risk it with, would I rather risk that the school system takes a child and doesn't teach them, or would I rather risk that a parent takes a child and doesn't teach them? I would rather risk the parent. Because here's what happens in the school system very often when they take that child and pretend to school the child and don't. The boy, very often boys, goes to school and gets an education in crime. Instead of him learning when the school is supposed to be teaching him, he's learning from the other little criminals around him. So it's not a matter of something needing to be perfect to let it be done. And this is one of the problems you regularly see when you discuss issues. When you discuss changes, someone points out that the change you want to make isn't perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be better than what is happening currently. And I will tell you, it will be miles better than what is happening currently. The thing is, a child being homeschooled, even if they are not being taught, here's what's going to happen to that parent. If you do not teach that child something useful, they are going to become your problem. Very soon. Very soon. Because remember, they are home with you. So instead of letting your little gremlin demon be patrolling the nation's capitals in school uniform, harassing people out there, now you have to cast out the demons all on your own because they're in your tail home. So I see in nearly, I know there are exceptions, but in nearly every situation, I think homeschooling may be better. Nearly every situation may be better. There are unique situations. You know, strange enough, where homeschooling might not be ideal is if you have what they call a gifted student. Salty casual asks, can parents afford to homeschool when they both need to make ends meet? Well, here's why I don't believe that salty casual. Because we just had this story of a single mother of 2 leaving a security guard job to teach her son home. and they made it. You see, at some point in time, people need to put their priorities in order. I remember talking to someone, and they know that their work is damaging their relationship with their child. But you know what? You know the statement they said? But you know, I have to work on it. I love nice things. The person knew. They knew they are sacrificing the well-being of their child and future for nice things. So, okay, you like to buy food. You don't like the taste of cassava and bhaji. You like to go movies. You like a new vehicle. You like paying for the top internet and having all of the cable channels. Okay, well then you work for such things. And if you think, if you determine that your child's education could be sacrificed for a big screen TV and more cable channels, well, that's your choice. But don't make it seem like it's not a choice. I believe every Trinidadian parent may be able to homeschool their child without dying of starvation. I don't think that happens. I don't think if Trinidadian parents start homeschooling in a bigger way, they all die from starvation. But I was saying, the exception, I think, would generally benefit from a more institutionalized schooling is what you call gifted students. So maybe if you're a student, if you have a child who is what we call gifted, very smart, they're learning at an increased rate, maybe that might be a bit more difficult for a parent to really fill all the spaces your child is trying to push into. So maybe you try to get some kind of institution that could push them. That might be one of the few exceptions. But, ironically, in order to determine whether your child is gifted or not, the parent might actually be the best one to determine that in this place. So again, you're left back with, at least to some extent. Anyway, people, that's all I have for now. Not really, because the schools might hold them back according to which school. Some schools push those things. That's all I have for now, people. I hope you were educated, informed, or entertained. This has been the Mindful Life. I am Nathan Springer. I will see you guys again for the next Mindful Live, which will be night, tomorrow evening, starting around 9:30. Until then, people, be well, stay safe, and I will see you guys later. Bye.